And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us once again. If you haven't already hit that like and subscribe button, make sure you do so. You can check out our live videos where we posted kind of our rankings for the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. Now we're going to go ahead and go over our draft strategy, what you guys need to look for as you prepare for your fantasy football drafts. I know we're a few weeks away from a lot of you guys drafting, but never too early to get started. We're going to do some live drafts here tonight as well. Make sure you check out those videos as well. If you haven't followed us over to Twitter already, make sure you do so. Follow us at UpsideSN and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. So as far as quarterbacks, we told you guys the top quarterback on our board is Jalen Hurts. Top running back, Austin Eckler. Top receiver is Justin Jefferson. We just finished up our wide receiver rankings video. You can check out that one and our short video that we posted for you guys as well on our YouTube page. But as far as draft strategy, everybody has their different ways that they like to do it. We're going to start off with snake drafts. What should you be looking for early in drafts? So let's look at kind of the rankings of how all the positions kind of work together, at least how it will appear if you're on the ESPN site. So you'll see kind of number one ranked is Justin Jefferson, then Jamar Chase, then Eckler, those kinds of things. Obviously, each person out there should have their own board. I know a lot of you guys believe in Cooper Kupp. I'm not a believer in him, but if you believe in him, hey, number 6 on your board, maybe he could be there. For me, he's not a first-round talent this year. And I think Travis Kelce, even at 5 for a tight end, extraordinarily high in the past, but I think he should be even higher than that. But make sure you prepare for your draft before you actually do it. Make sure you understand which type of draft you're doing. But as far as a snake draft goes, you want to go for the best overall talent, highest floor with the highest ceiling that you can possibly get with that number 1 pick. You want some certainty that that player is going to be a stud for you in fantasy. You don't want to take a high-risk player. So, for instance, Cooper Kupp, for me, coming off of injury on a team that's a little bit of a down year last year, their offense looks a little bit worse. Their defense looks a little bit worse. It looks like Matthew Stafford has lost a little bit of that magic that he had when he first came over to play for the Rams. It just doesn't look like it's going to work. So let me pull up the screen for you guys. Bear with me for just a moment. There we go. So as you can see, Jefferson 1, Chase 2, Eckler 3, McCaffrey 4, Kelce 5 is what ESPN would give you as their top 5 rankings. So make sure you prepare as to what you want to do with each pick. If I'm picking number 1, my top player this year, Justin Jefferson. Easy lock. At number 2, I don't think Chase is going to be worth it over Eckler, and I value Kelce over Eckler. So for me, a guy like Travis Kelce would be my number 2 pick if I had the pick there at number 2 and Jefferson went 1. But you also have to pay attention to how your draft goes. If you pick, say, Justin Jefferson at 1, and then there's a massive run on running backs between your first pick and your next pick at 20, you may want to go ahead and try to pick up one of those running backs to make sure you at least get one of those guys. Or you could go ahead and flex around and say, hey, you left all these receivers on the board. I'm going to create a massive advantage for myself week to week by having Justin Jefferson as my top receiver. Say they allow, say all these other running backs are gone. Say that CeeDee Lamb is still there when you come around to 20. You pick him up, and then you pick up, say, A.J. Brown. That would be a massive advantage for you week in, week out at that position. Now, is it going to happen for you that way? Probably not, but you have to be prepared for how the board falls to you even after your first pick. So we mentioned in our last video kind of teams to target when you're drafting this year. I want any piece of these offenses that I can get. I want Kansas City's offensive weapons. I want Buffalo, Jacksonville. I want Philadelphia, Minnesota, Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Miami. All of those teams are going to be great offensively, and I want as much of those offenses as I can possibly get. Now, I'm not necessarily going to pass up on players on other teams just because of it, but it might, if I'm debating between two players as to which player I might lean towards, I might go for the team that's going to have the better overall offense because there's going to be more opportunities for touchdowns, more opportunities for yardage, those types of things. So those are the teams I'm really looking at. Now, as far as draft strategy, I like to create one advantage somewhere on my roster. So, for instance, if I draft Travis Kelce, obviously I have the advantage every single week. Travis Kelce is healthy and in the lineup. I know I have the best tight end on the board, hands down. Now, how big of an advantage? Most tight ends, you're probably going to be looking 8 to 10 points per week anyway, as far as expectation. Travis Kelce, you might see an expectation of 18 to 20. That's a 10-point advantage every single week over whoever your opponent might be. Now, there's going to be some weeks where the other tight end might be a little bit more value. Others where they don't even have one that's on their roster. Or they don't even have one that's off of a bye, where you're really going to have an advantage. But on average, Travis Kelce should have about a 10-point advantage over most other tight ends out there. And so that's why Travis Kelce is so high on my board. That 10 points is a lot bigger of a gap than, say, a Justin Jefferson to a CeeDee Lamb or something like that. Justin Jefferson's a great player, fantastic player, but he's not worth 10 points more per week than, say, a CeeDee Lamb or a Garrett Wilson even, who's off of my board. There's a lot of other talent out there that you can go after in those types of situations. Now, say the board falls to you like we talked about just a moment ago. Jefferson at 1, you scoop up Lamb and A.J. Brown at 20 and 21. The value of having that much explosive point production at that wide receiver and flex spot will cover some of your losses at running back. So say you get down to your running back group. Let me pull this up here. Say your running backs you're left with are Alexander Mattison. That's a great number 1 type running back if you have those 3 receivers. And say you end up with Javonte Williams. You're going to be lacking a little bit there at the running back spot. I would still try to get another top-end running back if I could. But if that's the way the roster falls for you, then I think you could survive it. You might have to create another advantage for yourself at quarterback in the 4th round and hopefully still get one of those top-end running backs here, like Aaron Jones or Jahmyr Gibbs, who I think are going to finish as borderline RB1s this year. Running backs that I'm steering away from, as far as talent that I would avoid, is going to be players on injury or players with contract issues, like Jacobs, Taylor. Those are the type of players I'm avoiding. Kamara with a suspension. Hall coming off of injury, I might take a run at him. Stevenson is still way overvalued even after the signing of Ezekiel Elliott. They still haven't really dropped his value after that. I think Ezekiel Elliott's going to take a healthy portion of that goal line work from Stevenson. But looking at how your draft should go, you want to create some type of advantage somewhere. Now, as far as you want to look for stability in the middle rounds, you've gotten your high-end players early. Now you want to kind of round out your roster. Say you get those top 3 receivers. Now you need to get that solidity in your roster. So you get those running backs like a Madison, like a Pierce. As my green screen drops. But you want to get that solidity in your lineup. So wherever you can get it in that middle round, you want to set a high floor for yourself. Once you get that stability back on your team, then you want to look for some lottery tickets late in your draft. Now, every draft has some players that you absolutely want to have in your roster. So for me, those players this year, from an offense perspective, I want Jahmyr Gibbs from the Detroit Lions this year on my roster. I don't care if I overdraft him by about 5 to 10 spots. I want him on my team. I'll take the risk of it. I think he's that good of a talent this year. By the same token, once you get later on into the draft, looking at these running backs specifically, if I draft a guy like Jamar Gibbs, then I can go down here a little bit lower and I can get his backup, a David Montgomery. I want to get some other lottery tickets like a DeAndre Swift, who's probably going to be a much better running back than he was in Detroit because he's probably going to be a little bit more healthier because they're not going to ask him to do quite as much. Now, that might sound like a bad thing for him as far as what his production is going to look like, but that Philadelphia Eagles offense is going to run. They are a very good running football team. You saw what they did with Miles Sanders, who I thought was a very good running back for them, but he never was utilized properly in that system. DeAndre Swift is exactly the type of running back I think the Philadelphia Eagles have been looking for, and I think he's probably going to have an 800 to 900 yard season with the Philadelphia Eagles this year. Now, they still have a kind of a two-headed monster there, a kind of a 1A, 1B situation there. I really like DeAndre Swift, though, this year. Keep your eyes peeled for what he can do for you. Other lottery tickets that you might want to take a run at as far as the running back room, I'm looking at Jamal Williams for the New Orleans Saints. Kamara's had some issues with legal issues now with suspensions. He's had ineffective play over the last couple of years. Sure, he's still one of the best running backs in the game when he's right, but it's been a long time since I've been able to count on him for that. Never been that high on him anyway. Jamal Williams has a nose for the end zone. He's going to get the start obviously early in the season. He's going to get off to a good start as well, at least for the first few weeks with Kamara out. He's going to get a heavy workload, and that New Orleans offense should at least be able to hold their own. Do I think they're going to tear the doors off of anybody? No, but I think Jamal Williams, with his ability to get in the end zone, is going to have a very high floor and has that ceiling of being the number one running back if Kamara comes back and isn't healthy, doesn't produce, whatever. They now have a really good 1A, 1B there with Jamal Williams. Do I think they still start Kamara when he comes back? I do, but I think Jamal Williams is better than most of the backups that they've had since Kamara has been there in New Orleans. Other running backs, I mentioned Elijah Mitchell in the other video that I posted out there. If McCaffrey goes down, Mitchell immediately becomes a top 15 running back in the entire NFL. Getting him in the round 14 would be a very prudent investment for any McCaffrey owner or for other owners who just want to improve their running back position overall. Other lottery tickets that's not even listed on here is, let's see, I think he's not on here. The rookie running back from Miami. He went down to an injury the other day in the preseason game. Still hasn't been any word as to the severity of the injury. This does hurt his chance to be, quote-unquote, a sleeper, though. But I really like what he brings to that team. They love speed there in Miami. They like to have kind of a track meet there, and I think he's exactly the type of running back they ultimately want to use. So I think next year he will definitely be in that mix for starting running back spot for them. This year I was hoping he would get there by the end of the season. So with the injury, we'll see what happens with him, but he's another guy to keep your eyes peeled for. As far as wide receivers, you want to look at some of the sleepers late in the round. You talk about guys like Pickens, Addison, Smith-Njigba, Jefferson, Flowers, players like that you can take late in your draft to see if you can get some better production out of them. Every year, one player comes out of nowhere and surprises us. Could be any one of those type of players. One other thing is you want to pay attention in your draft and don't be afraid to go for players that are off of your board. So, for instance, remember how I was talking about Cooper Kupp, how he would be off of my board because he's not going to be available in round 1 or round 2 for me at the price point that I like, but he might be there in round 3, he might be there in round 4. If he's there, if there's so much value there that I have to take that type of player, Cooper Kupp then would be my number 3 or 4 receiver. He's not going to get there. But if somebody falls like that to you in the draft, say Josh Jacobs, everybody steers away from him because of his contract status and all those kinds of things. If he's available to you way up below his value, go ahead and get him. Get that assured value there for him. And if he does stay healthy, you've really got some really nice value there in that pick. But of course, the reasons why he's off your board are the same risks that you have taking him late. So it just reduces the amount of risk that you have overall. Other things that you want to pay attention to, you want to look for players that might be reaching for themselves. So, for instance, you look at the quarterback position. A lot of drafts out there like to draft the quarterbacks really early. I'm a fan of drafting a few of them in rounds 3 through 6. You talk about guys like Hurts, Mahomes, Fields, and Allen. Jackson would probably be in that group as well. I know I'm a little bit higher on a guy like Justin Fields than others, but those are quarterbacks I would be comfortable taking in that 3 to 6 range, however you want to stack them up. There's a couple other quarterbacks that are outside that group, Burrow, Herbert, Lawrence, that I think are still going to be very productive fantasy quarterbacks for you this year. then it's not much after that. You don't want to be one of those guys stuck with, Anthony Richardson or Kirk Cousins or Dak Prescott or Russell Wilson as your quarterback. If you watched our draft we did last night with the salary cap or auction draft, you saw we got stuck with Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson on our salary cap team. Now, our floor for our position players is a lot higher because of how we drafted in that. But we took a big gamble by doing that. That's the downside of measuring risk versus reward. Now, one other thing as far as the different types of drafts. Snake, obviously, you start at the top and work your way down as far as most talent to least talented player. In a salary cap or auction style draft, any player can be auctioned at any time. So make sure, depending on how your room is bidding on players, you want to make sure you bid or you nominate players that you don't want early. You want other teams to spend their money on those types of players. That will help drive down the price a little for the players you actually want to keep on your roster. You want to make sure that you try to save some money early on in the draft. That way you can still capitalize on players that you absolutely want on your roster. Say in round 6, you're like, I want Darren Waller. I really value this tight end. And even though Travis Kelce is great, I think Darren Waller is going to be fantastic in New York, etc. Fantastic. If you believe in him, go for it. However, you want to make sure you have enough money, but you also don't want to overspend too much. So, for instance, if his value is at 6, you might be willing to go up to 10. If the pricing gets up to like 20 for a guy like Darren Waller, that's when you should start reconsidering your decision, obviously. But appreciate you guys joining us here today. Just kind of recapping as far as strategy, what you guys want to look out for this year. Make sure that you're paying attention to the rankings of your own and for the rankings of the room as a whole. If players are being overdrafted, if there's a big run on running backs, make sure you don't miss out and get stuck with, starting running back that looks like, Miles Sanders. If he's your number one running back on your team, you might need to get some running help or pay attention to that waiver wire, especially in week 1, week 2. If your top receiver on your team, let me pull that up for you guys, is not one of these top 20 guys, if your top receiver is a guy like Mike Evans, it might be a long year for you as far as a receiver. And receivers are tougher to come by on the waiver wire. Their consistency is a little tougher to gauge, which is why running backs are a lot better to pick up in the waiver wire. So if you need to draft, if positional scarcity is important to you, and you're leaning one or the other, I would probably go with the receiver one way over the other, just because the receiver is a little bit more of a surefire bet when you draft them this high. You're talking about Ridley, Debo, Jefferson, etc. Lean the receiver over the running back in most of those situations. Now, if there's a must-have player on the running back side, like for me, Gibbs, I would still draft Gibbs over a guy like Debo Samuel. I would still draft Gibbs over a guy like T. Higgins. That's how high I am on him. And don't be afraid to, go after the guys you want on your roster. The last thing you want to do is what Field Yates did in the Fantasy Football Marathon draft, where he picked Cortland Sutton, or I think it was Cortland Sutton, and was really hoping to get Christian Kirk or one of the other receivers there with the next pick, and he didn't get to him. So make sure you get the player you absolutely want on your roster, not necessarily the safe player, but the player you want. Which player, if you had to pick between the two, would you rather have? That's the player you want to go for first, and then get the next option. Don't wait for other teams to try to take advantage of them by thinking a player is going to slide to you. If you value that player more, go get him. Just don't reach too far. But thank you guys for joining us here today. We'll have our live draft show tonight as well. We're going to do a couple of drafts again. We'll probably do a couple of snake drafts tonight. We might even do one this afternoon. But appreciate you guys joining us once again, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.